Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Behind me, 2008 Subaru Outback. We're going to be replacing the power steering rack. So follow along, let's get this thing fixed. Alright, first thing we want to do is jack the tire up, pull off the car. Jack the tire up, jack the car up, and pull off the tire. We want to do this on both sides. We're going to pull off our outer tie rod. Once everything's jacked up, now we can turn the steering wheel to get better access to this tie rod. Now there should be a cotter pin we have to take off. A pair of side cutters like this works really well getting these. Just want to bend that back side, tap it a few times. Get a little screwdriver. Get a little more light too. There, hopefully that helps. So the little bent tail, we just want to bend it as straight as we can. We want to try to get a little bit of that head poking through. Oh, this is a lot of rust on it. All right, that's not working. So what I'm going to do is flatten the head. You can see here's a new cotter pin, and it has that head, kind of looks like the eye of a needle. So what I'm going to do is just take a screwdriver like this, set it on top of that head, and just squish it. Squish this little needle eye flat, and then push it in. I'm using a screwdriver, but a punch would be a better idea. And then we'll just pull it through the other side. And what's nice about these side cutters is that they grip onto the cotter. This idea isn't working either. I'm gonna flatten that head just a little more. Should go right through. Of course it's gonna be a pain. It's not pulling through, so I'm just gonna try to push it out from the tail. There we go, and then grab it from the head. There. So it should have worked the other way. I don't know if you can see it, but that little head eye needle is gone. But anyway, we got it off. So a couple different ways to do it. 19 millimeter. Buzzes off. Now we just want to tap on the knuckle. Don't have to beat it too hard, but just to cause some vibration for the outer tie rod to fall out of its little keeper. All right, there we go. All right, getting a little ahead of myself. We want to put this back on. Just a couple of threads, doesn't have to be completely on, just so it doesn't fall down. What we want to do is pull off this jam nut, 19 millimeter. There we go. Then we can pull this back off. Now we want to count how many turns it takes to get off of the inner tie rod. So there's one full turn, two, and we'll just count how many full turns it takes to come completely off. Then when we put it back on, we'll put it back on that same number, and that'll put us right in the ballpark. We still want this to be aligned when we're all finished, but that way we're pretty close so we can drive it down to the alignment shop. All right, and we can take this lock nut off too. So I have a 13 mil here to hold the inner tie rod, and then it's the 19 millimeter to buzz it off. There we go. We'll need to save this for the new inner tie rod on the rack. All right, this side is done for now. Let's hop over, do the exact same on the other side. I won't film that. It'll be the same as we just did here. So if you look on the new one, we gotta pull it off right here. This is a little splined shaft that connects the steering wheel to the power steering rack. So there's a shaft there. It's a 12 millimeter bolt. I'll show you on the vehicle. But as far as getting it off, there's not really a whole lot of room to film. So I just wanted to show you that we're pulling this off right here, this connection. So this is the driver's side. If you see the heater core hoses right there, and you just follow them down right under the heater core hose, all the way down. I don't know if you can see it right there. That's the bolt we need to take off. It's a 12 millimeter bolt. I don't believe we have to move anything here out of the way, just that bolt there, and then we'll slide that shaft off of the spline. All right, got the bolt off. So this is what I would recommend, is to do this first, even before jacking it up, even before pulling the outer tie rods off both sides. Do this. The reason is because as I was trying to crack that bolt off or loose, the steering wheel shaft, it wanted to spin. So having it on the ground, having the tires on the ground would prevent that from happening. But we did get it off. If you did what I did, and all that stuff's already off. It's in the air. What I did, let me move this, show you with the different flashlight. So I just put a pry bar on that top knuckle there. And it's kind of hard to see in, but there is another little U-joint type knuckle. That's where I put the pry bar, just to hold the steering shaft in place while pulling that off, and it worked. I was able to get this in there, which was sweet. I cracked it loose with a ratchet and then was able to get my electric ratchet snaked in there and taken off. So that was kind of nice. So now we are golden. What we want to do is turn the steering wheel to center. So straight ahead on the steering wheel, and then we'll pull that completely off. So now underneath on the driver's side, we're going to pull this little wing off here, 14 millimeter. 3 14s and 1 12. And then sliding over, we're gonna pull this shield off, 14 millimeter bolts. And these two front ones have a nut from up top. So we'll just get a 14 mil wrench, put it up top, buzz it off. Now that exposes 2 brackets. There's one here with 3 bolts on it, and then over here with just 2 bolts on it. So we'll get both of those off. 14 mil. Gonna leave one in here just with a few threads on it. All right, we'll pop this other side off. There you go. On this one, I thought there was just 3 bolts, but there's actually a 4th bolt right there. Still a 14 mil. And this can kind of, I guess it can stay in there, or you want to wiggle it out, it's up to you. But we'll just keep it there. If you look right there, you can see the splines on the shaft. So that's the steering column starting to come off of the steering rack. And as this comes down, we'll wiggle and jiggle it off of that those splines there. So on the passenger side, underneath the intake boot, if you look right down there, there's some fittings. So that's where I'm gonna pull it off from, and it looks like it'll all just snake out from underneath that little cutout in the frame there. All right, we got them off. You can see they're just loose here. A 14 millimeter and a 17 millimeter. Was able to get those off. I also disconnected, there's a bracket here that joins them together. I disconnected that just so I can get that 14 millimeter off a little easier. But you are gonna spill a lot of power steering fluid from that line. So just have something underneath, a nice catch underneath to get it. I'm gonna let that drip for a while, and then I think we're ready to pull this rack out. It's gonna be hard to see, but I got everything off that I showed you. This side over here where those lines are that we disconnected, I put that bracket back up just to lift those lines up. So we're just gonna pull that bracket off. There's just the 2 14 millimeter bolts. Just pull those back off. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to slide it to the passenger side so we can clear this over here, the sway bar, get this outer tie rod under it, and then we're gonna pull it out the driver's side. That's the plan anyway. Let's see what happens. And we still got the, there we go. I don't know. This is gonna work like I think it is. I'm not sure what I'm stuck on. Looks like maybe the exhaust does have to be lowered. I was hoping it didn't. It's just this tie rod here is hitting the bolt. There we go. I'll show you that hang up when I'm all finished, because we'll have to figure out a way around it. Putting it back in. Okay, there we go. Now it's doing what I thought it would do. Down and out, right? Now what am I stuck on? Stuck on those lines. Wonder if I can twist this thing now. How about this way? It's like so close. There we go, there we go. Okay, it's out. Whoa, there it is. Whoa. Not too bad. On the driver's side, my biggest hang up for dropping it down was this bolt here. So on the way in, what I might do before putting it in is just taking this bolt, this nut off, and then tapping the bolt flush with this. And that should be what I need to get it in. Because the bellows boot, that's this one, the inner tie rod boot, it was getting hung up on it, and that was just the frustration trying to get this side, the driver's side, down. Once that was down, it came out pretty much. Then this just had to be a little finessed and finagled out of its little spot, and it came out. So it wasn't really a hang up, just some fancy moves to get that out. So what we want to do as far as transferring over stuff, we want to get this whole line transferred. Remember, this goes under the line, so we just have to remember that. And I believe that's it. So we'll disconnect that line from here, and then there's this little bracket here, and then that whole line comes out. This also has to be transferred over, that bracket, and I think that's it. And then we're ready to slap it back in. This side here, I'm having a little trouble getting this power steering line off. The 17 mil, it's 17 and 14 on this side as well. The 17 came off, the 14 is struggling. So I'm just gonna use a little torch, heat up, not the nut, but just around this casing here on the power steering rack. That's what's gonna get heated up. Usually heat solves a lot of problems. Oh, come on. Oh man, still doesn't want to come off. I'm gonna go a little longer. Ugh. Wow, this thing's stuck. It's starting to round that bolt. Let me smack it with a hammer. Nope. It's just rounding that bolt. It's really stuck in there. All right, got it off. So what I did was just try the third time and just really let that torch sit in, and got all the way around it for quite a while to make sure that that aluminum was super hot. One thing about aluminum is it won't turn cherry red like steel will. So you gotta be careful. If you put the flame in one spot for too long, it'll melt the aluminum. So just something to keep in mind for the future. We're not reusing this rack, but if we were, we don't want to melt that aluminum. But we got it off. I'm gonna let these cool off before installing them onto the other rack. Cool. All right, got everything transferred over to the new rack. These are in. Don't forget that we have this thing that has to go on before our lines go on. And then it only goes on one way, so you can't accidentally get it turned around or flipped around. This one as well only goes on one way, but make sure that that comes off. And then we have this little clamp clamped on, so this is all ready to go. And I believe they set it in the neutral position, so the tie rods should make the tires point straight ahead. So on our steering wheel, we just want to double check that our steering wheel is still pointing straight ahead when we put this back in. And then here, with that bolt, it's a 17 millimeter. It's a nut on one side, and then hold the bolt on that side. And then I just pushed it back flush. So we'll have to torque that in a certain way when we put it all back together, the suspension and stuff back together. But that should be out of our way. I think we're ready to go ahead and try to maneuver this thing back up and in. All right, I know the angle's not the best, but this is the best I can set the camera up. So now, we're gonna try to, let's see, put it up here on the passenger side first. And then we'll have to maneuver these lines, just like getting it out. Just some twisting is all it takes. Pull this little cap off the tie rod end. What we need to do is reach up and grab our shaft for the steering wheel shaft. Make sure that lines up with the rack. Okay, what am I getting stuck on? Oh, it's that. Oh, don't be like that. Let me check something on the old rack. Okay, so this is a remanufactured rack. So I think the hydraulic lines are just a little tweaked. But to be honest, if the exhaust was removed, this would be a lot easier. The reason why I'm not removing the exhaust is because these bolts are pretty rusty, and I don't want that headache. So I'm trying to get around removing the exhaust, but that's just a tip. Removing the exhaust would make this 100 times easier. Just using a little pry bar to see if I can get those lines to move just a little. I don't even have to move very much, just a little. Whew, it's killing my arms. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take the exhaust off. There's no way this new rack will go in with the exhaust on. So let me show you how to take that off. There's really only a few bolts, so hopefully yours isn't too rusty. If it is, then using a torch, getting that bolt or nut super red and nice looking will really help in a rusty situation. So let me show you where the bolts are, and I'll try to get these off. So we're really just taking this off. So there's 3 bolts right there in a triangle. We'll get those off. I believe those are 14 millimeter. And then follow this back to right, get some light on it. Right there is a 14 millimeter bolt. And then keep following it back, and it's hard to see because I'm on wide angle, but there's 2 bolts there that need to come off. I don't know if those are 12 or 14, I can't remember, but it's either a 12 or a 14. So those come off, and then this whole pipe right here can just, it'll slide up and over this little lip here and then drop down and out of the way. Hopefully it's that easy. All right, just so you know what I did, I couldn't get it off of that one back there, those 2 bolts, but I was able to get it off of that center one and then pry it down and back, and then it came off of this, and so it's just resting on the ground. That's plenty what we need. And then there was a bracket here, just like on the other side, this little metal bracket, I pulled that off. So we should be able to, I was trying to go in on the passenger side first and then up on the driver's side, but getting it through this hole on the driver's side wasn't working because of these lines here, but on the top, they were just sticking up too much and I couldn't get it to fit in. So now what I'm gonna do is go in the driver's side first. So angle it up to the driver's side, get that fitted in, and then it should just fit right up. So that's what I'm hoping. It could be that this bolt right here is also in the way, just like on the other side. We'll see. If it is, then just like the other side, what I'll do is take that nut off and then push this bolt just flush right here. But we'll see first. But if I have to do that, I will, no problem. So taking the exhaust off, and then in retrospect, I mean, taking the exhaust off is the ticket. So go ahead and do that. Save yourself the headache. Learn from me. All right, so I have this just kind of finger tight in right there. It did go in on this side pretty easy. Didn't have an issue with that bolt like I thought. So perfect there. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of finger tightening some of this stuff just to get it kind of started and put in place. And then of course the bolts, a lot of them are the same, just these 2 long ones go in where that bushing is. So that's kind of just the 2 odd ones, no big deal. And you don't want to cross thread anything, so if it's not going in right, then don't just use your power tool. Looks good, so we can do the initial tightening on these. There's 4 bolts here and then the 2 bolts here. Again, all 14 millimeter. All right, we'll get torque specs on that in a little bit. I think that's it. We can put the exhaust back up. What I want to make sure is that none of these hydraulic lines are rubbing against any of the frame because it's a reman rack. I just want to make sure. So getting this steering wheel back on was actually pretty easy. It almost just fell into place. And actually looking at it from under here, man, you got a lot better access from under here than you do at the top. So that's what I recommend. Instead of going from the top underneath the heater core hoses, come in from down here. Looks like you got a good amount of room, and you may have to turn the steering wheel away from center just to get that nut, loosen off, or that bolt loosen off, and then recenter the steering wheel when you got it off. But yeah, that kind of just slid on, you wiggle it a little. Before I put this bolt on for that steering column, what I'm gonna do actually is wait on that until we get the tie rods back on, because I wanna make sure that this steering rack is center. So the steering wheel is center right now. That means the tires should be pointing straight forward. So once we get the tie rods on, the tires should be in their straightforward position. So I'm gonna wait on that. But we can start buttoning up these little wing pieces here. We could put those back on and do that for both sides. So as far as torque goes, this is what I have. The clamp, it shows you this bracket here, that little wing bracket, and that clamp is 44 foot-pounds. And then these lines are 10.8 foot-pounds. Install the U-joint. So that U-joint is 17.7 foot-pounds, and that's the U-joint for the steering column. Then the cotter pin and castle nut, that is 19 foot-pounds for that. And then if it doesn't quite line up on a castle for that cotter pin, then just keep tightening it until the next slot is available to put a cotter pin in. Stabilizer link. So there's the smaller 12mm bolt on the stabilizer. That's only 18 foot-pounds. So do not tighten that to the 40 something foot-pounds, but it's only 18 for that 12mm. The exhaust looks like 29 foot-pounds. The rear two, if you took off your rear two, that is 13 foot-pounds. And then that hanger is 25 foot-pounds for that 14mm hanger bolt. We didn't remove the manifold or anything, so don't worry about that. Then install the front wheels. They're saying the wheel nuts are 65 foot-pounds. Typically I tighten these to 80, but that's what the manual's saying is 65. Lower the vehicle. Now it's saying remove the steering wheel, align the center position of the roll connector. That's the roll connector or clock spring, depending on who you talk to. Then install the steering wheel again. Our steering wheel, it has been pointing straight forward the whole repair. So it didn't get out of alignment at all. So I don't know why they have you do this. I think it's an unnecessary step. But there it is in the manual. Then connect the battery, bleed out the system. So bleeding out the system will just be topping it off and then turning the steering wheel a few times, topping it off. Lock to lock is what we want. So all the way in one direction, all the way back, topping it off, bleeding out all the air. Then look for any leaks, check the fluid level, and then after all this, so our tie rod in lock nut is 62 foot-pounds, and that's it. And then we have to go get it aligned afterwards. All right, there you go. That's how you can replace a steering rack on a Subaru Outback. Really not too challenging. Not taking off the exhaust was my bad. It's actually in the manual to take off the exhaust. That would have made things a lot easier. So I was struggling unnecessarily. So that's on me. Otherwise, and again, not too bad. I believe this is like around a 3-hour job or something like that. And it's taken me longer than it should have. Now, I didn't film torquing things down, but I did show you the manual and what those torques are. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.